Is atheism truly a mere rejection of the idea of God? Is it simply disbelief in God?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Plink. I respond to various theological and ideological questions and claims from a rationalistic and naturalistic approach in an effort to give and explain the opposite viewpoint and help to balance the conversation. Today's video comes to us from a channel and creator called Ash Mays, who seems to think that everyone is, in some way or other, religious. And atheists are no exception. Atheists are just substituting other religion-like things in place of any theistic religion. Now, my initial reaction to such an idea, while not acquiescing to it, would be, so what? I mean, atheism is not the same as irreligious, and it never has been. Lest you would be leaving out many a non-theistic religion out of the conversation, like Buddhism or Jainism. But even if you wanted to make the argument that any branch of atheism just supplants one type of faith for another, none of that even gets to the heart of the matter, which would be, does any God actually exist? And trying to muddy the waters with talk about atheists just being as religious as any people who believe in God, that not only ignores the core issue, but seems to do your own position a world of disservice. Because whenever a theist claims atheists are just as religious as they are, they tend to do so in an accusatory manner, as if being religious were a bad thing, and the atheists are just as guilty of it as the theists are. It's a bit like saying, yeah, I robbed that bank, but you held up a liquor store or two in your time, so there, haha. Well, that's not an argument. It's not even pointing out hypocrisy, unless you're claiming that practitioners of one faith are somehow not allowed to claim that a different faith is incorrect in their beliefs or practices, which is a large part of what every religious apologist spends a good portion of their time doing. But I don't even agree with the starting premise that atheism is just another religion to begin with. But hey, who knows? Maybe Ash will actually have an argument that holds water in claiming that atheism actually is a religion. So let's give him the floor and hear him out on why the non-faithful are, in actuality, super full of faith. But before we get to that, if you end up liking what you see in this video and would like to help out the channel, make sure to subscribe and click the bell so you'll always be notified when new content comes out. Check out my social media, including my Patreon, Twitter, and Blue Sky, all linked in the description. And of course, like this video, pop in a comment. All that goes a long way towards pleasing the YouTube algorithm, who perceives possibilities past pious pronouncements and prioritizes principled paths promoting peace and personal power. Purely pragmatic perspectives permit palpable improvements propelled by proof, not prayer, parting with preternatural prescriptions of pietistic pinheads. May keep my channel motoring along. Now on to today's video.
Now, today I want to challenge the notion that atheism is in fact as free-thinking as atheists would like you to believe that they are, and prove that in fact atheism never removes religion, it simply replaces it.
So to start off, as previously mentioned, atheism is not the opposite of religion. Atheism is the opposite of theism. The opposite of religious would be irreligious. There are many irreligious people who also believe in some kind of God or higher power, and there are plenty of religious practitioners who do not believe in any kind of a deity. There are entire religions that do not posit or even much concern themselves with the existence of a god. The previously mentioned Buddhism and Jainism are two of the big ones. Taoism does not typically posit any deities. Confucianism also doesn't. Some indigenous people's spiritual traditions didn't focus on any deities per se, but instead spirits, ancestors, and harmony with nature. So, to be religious is not the same as to be a theist. Hell, you can even be spiritual and believe in magic and souls and an afterlife and still be an atheist, so long as you don't believe any particular deity or creator-god concept was behind it all. Ash seems to be focusing on one particular type of atheist, the anti-theist, anti-religious, hard atheist contingent of the atheist community, and insisting that they are the entirety of what modern atheism is. And while he couldn't be more wrong about that, Okay, whatever. I'll play along for the sake of the argument. All atheists hate religion and all its practitioners and absolutely eschew any hint of organized systems of worship or spiritual faith. So, what now?
Now, let's start with something really fundamental. It seems to be that human beings are hardwired to be religious creatures. Okay? Through thousands of years of human history, we can see that atheism, or not believing in God, is a fairly new idea, relatively.
Even when I try to help you, man, you go and mess it up. If we're gonna focus on religion and faith, then keep it to religion and faith. But then you go and say something as stupid as not believing in God is a relatively new thing. Well, no, it's not, Ash. I mean, the non-theistic religions I've already mentioned date back thousands of years, but in addition to that, there's also been organized systems of thought that have rejected belief in God going all the way back to ancient times. In ancient India, as early as the 6th century BCE, the Charvaka school of philosophy explicitly rejected the existence of gods, the afterlife, and supernatural phenomena, instead advocating for a materialistic view. Other Indian philosophical schools like Sankhya and early Mimamsa were also atheistic in that they did not accept a creator deity within their systems. In ancient Greece, by the 5th century BCE, there were thinkers like Diagoras of Melos who were openly described as atheists for denying the existence of gods. Basically, as long as there's been organized belief in deities, there have been those within the societies in which those beliefs arose who rejected them. Atheism is literally older than theism, because before the first God concept was ever conceived of, that person who conceived of it was an atheist prior to believing in that God.
Okay, so it seems that human beings are hardwired to believe in God. Now, you might say just because that's the way that it's been done, or that's the way that it's been thought of till now, doesn't mean that it's the right way for things to be or the right way for you to think about it. However, it does seem, and I'm going to get into this, that it is hardwired and that you cannot be truly irreligious, that you cannot be truly an atheist.
Bullshit. I'm calling blazing bullshit.
Humans are neither hardwired for belief in God nor for practicing religion, which again are two separate things. If it were the case that humans were hardwired for belief in God, then belief in God would be automatic rather than a learned behavior. But all religion is learned, as are all God concepts. But when you're talking about some belief or behavior being hardwired into humans, you're talking about the realm of cognitive biology and how the brain works. While the idea of a God gene has been explored and debated, the current scientific consensus within fields like cognitive science, of religion, and evolutionary psychology suggests that belief in God is not likely to be a single hardwired trait. Instead, it's more likely that several aspects of human cognition, which evolved for other reasons, make us predisposed to religious belief as a side effect, such as the Hypersensitive Agency Detection Device, or HADD. This is a cognitive mechanism that biases humans to readily attribute intentionality and agency to events and objects in their environment. This tendency is thought to be an evolutionary adaptation, potentially leading to survival advantages in a world where detecting hidden threats is crucial. You may have heard about this evolutionary advantage in early humans before. If you see the bushes nearby rustling, the person who attributed it to a large predator hiding in those bushes and then ran away afraid had a better chance of survival than the person who just thought it was a random occurrence and stuck around, possibly getting eaten. The fact that we assign agency and intentionality to natural occurrences is a byproduct of a cognitive tendency that kept us one step ahead of the things that wanted to make a meal out of us. And the consequence today is that people see God in rainbows and babies giggling. Other evolutionary adaptations that make belief in the supernatural, and particularly a God being, more common include things like pattern recognition. Humans are adept at finding patterns, sometimes even where they don't exist, which could contribute to seeing purpose or design in the universe. Also, there's the psychological need for explanation and comfort. Religion often provides explanations for the unknown and offers comfort in times of distress. These psychological needs might make religious ideas more appealing. And then, as far as developing organized religion goes, a big evolutionary reason for that is social cohesion. Shared religious beliefs and practices can promote group cooperation and social bonding, which could have had evolutionary advantages. So, none of these aspects of human cognition develop directly in order to foster God belief, and God belief itself is not hardwired into humanity. It's just an unfortunate side effect of the various things that are hardwired into us that often lend towards theistic belief.
So, when an atheist rejects the idea of a God, whether that is a biblical style Abrahamic God or a more abstract Eastern idea of God, the rejection of God does not simply end there. I don't believe in God. That doesn't end there.
Yes, it does. And anything else that you're about to posit is totally separate and divorced from that person's atheism.
It is almost always replaced by some kind of other ideology. And you see this with religion being replaced with Marxism or communism. These are state worship religions. They have, structures like a religious structure, and they do believe in an objective truth, depending on which ideology it is, that would take the place of God.
Yeah, that's actually not how it worked.
So this is Ash's personal bias shining through. A cursory glance at his video list shows that Ash has a real bug up his ass about communism. Now, obviously, leaving religion does not automatically turn one into a communist. I think I would know. I left religion and I'm not a communist. And frankly, in terms of communism, as Ash is attempting to position it, as state or government worship, I don't see hardly any of that in the US atheist community. While I will admit to a certain leftist or liberal tendency, that certainly doesn't translate to state worship, especially given the current administration and the common liberal disdain for it. But even under Biden in the previous administration, or even the more well-loved Obama administration, you'd be hard-pressed to find any of the prominent atheists in America advocating total supplication to or reverence for the government or any representatives of the state. Furthermore, the idea that communism, or any economic or political philosophy for that matter, replaces religious belief or theism is utterly idiotic in light of the fact that nearly every theist also has economic and political philosophies, in addition to their belief in God. And given the ravenousness of both theistic belief as well as political engagement of many people who would be categorized as the evangelical right,
if you are anointed by Yahweh for a specific plan and purpose, you are a Messiah. Yeshua was the Messiah of mankind, but Donald Trump is the Messiah of America.
I think it's pretty clear that while politics can merge in many ways with theistic faith, they are very clearly separate things, and one can have both, one or the other, or neither. So the idea that some people leave religion and become politically active, and that this indicates that they've just replaced religion with a political philosophy, well, it's seriously lacking some evidence to back it up. Most people have political philosophies to some degree. Also, this notion of replacing religion with politics ignores those atheists who never had a religion to replace. What about those who were just raised irreligious? Or would you claim that they are all rabid political activists who jumped on the communist bandwagon as soon as they could walk? Also, even if it were the case that someone raised religious, became an atheist later on, then at some point also became highly politically motivated and engaged, that doesn't mean that such engagement had anything to do with the rejection of religion. See, that would be what's called a post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy, claiming that because event Y followed event X, event Y must have been caused by event X without properly establishing causality.
No, Mother, I could not feel your church group praying for my safety. The fact that I'm home safe does not prove that it worked. That logic is post hoc ergo propter hoc. No, I'm not sassing you in Eskimo talk.
Just because someone leaves religion and then becomes, in your example, a communist, does not mean that leaving religion caused them to become a communist. You have to offer some kind of evidence that links the two and shows causality. And maybe if you even had any kind of statistic showing an increase in any kind of political engagement when leaving religion, you might have the beginning inklings of a point. But you don't even have that. Just the self-assured insistence that leaving religion makes you a commie.
So being an atheist in those senses does not seem to does not seem to reject God. It seems to replace God. So those people are religious. And you can see this with things like climate activism. They have dogma, doctrine. There are heresies. There are sins. You can be excommunicated. It functions like a religious system in every single way.
What are you babbling about?
You are playing majorly fast and loose with what can be considered doctrine, sins, or heresy. All of those things have, as a crucial part of their definitions, the existence of God. Doctrine is the expressed word or command of God. Sin is something that is bad purely and for no other reason than because it goes against the will or command of God. And heresy is speaking against the will or command of God, and it's bad for no other reason than because it goes against God. On the other hand, climate activism has nothing so frivolous as commands that must be followed just because we say so. There are instead best practices for environmental protection that's borne out by the studies and work of climate scientists, whose work and findings is publicly available for anyone and everyone to examine to see if there are flaws. For instance, PFAs, or per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or more commonly known as forever chemicals. They're a large group of human-made chemicals that don't break down easily in the environment and can accumulate in the environment, in animals, and in the human body over time, and have been shown to have numerous harmful effects on the environment and on living organisms. Exposures to such PFAs has been linked to various health problems, including increased cholesterol levels, decreased vaccine response in children, increased risk of thyroid disease, increased risk of some cancers like kidney or testicular, increased risk of high blood pressure or preeclampsia during pregnancy, lower infant birth weight, immune system effects, liver damage, fertility issues. And due to their persistence and potential health impacts, PFA contamination is a significant environmental and public health concern. Many efforts are underway to monitor and mitigate PFA's contamination. Now, this isn't doctrine, because none of it was based on nothing more than authoritative commands. It's based on proven science and a wealth of corroborating evidence. Speaking out against any effort to curb the use of PFAs isn't heresy because, for one, no one's trying to stop anyone from doing so. But instead, the effort is simply to show that PFAs are harmful, and thus any claim that they aren't is simply wrong. And continuing the use of forever chemicals isn't sin, it's just not good for the environment or people or animals in general. And since that's provable, you should stop using them. Basically, using valid reasoning to mitigate something perceived as negative is not at all what religion does. Religion says, don't cheat on your spouse because God doesn't want you to. That's doctrine. That's dogma. That's a sin. Valid reasoning, on the other hand, says don't cheat on your spouse because it will hurt them emotionally, ruin your relationship, potentially tear apart your family, and is a violation of a vow that you made to be faithful, thereby making you an untrustworthy person to your word, and thus more likely to be an untrustworthy member of society at large. That is clearly explained and provably sound reasoning. Climate activism is more like that. It's not saying, follow these environmental edicts for no other reason than because we say so. It's, here's a bunch of studies, evidence, explanations, and reasoning as to why these best environmental practices should be followed for the good of everyone. It's frankly distressing that you can't see the difference between the two, Ash.
Now, You might be thinking, well, I'm a rational atheist. I don't get into that kind of nonsense. I simply live in a rational way based in science. I only take what is rational. I don't get involved in silliness, and I don't believe in God, and I don't have some kind of religious system replacing it. Well, the problem with claiming that is that, well, when we're talking about Western atheists or people who are atheists who live in the Western world, what a lot of those people, and you might be one of them, and I want you to think about this for a moment, what a lot of those people do is that they either fail to recognize or refuse to admit that their rationality and liberalism exists within the frameworks created in Western society of a Judeo-Christian worldview.
Okay, that was a mouthful. But hey, who am I to criticize anyone for being long-winded? So, for starters, you had a moment in there where you accused all Western atheism of being liberal. And I have experienced that that is certainly not the case. As I can't even hint at disliking Donald Trump or MAGA in any of my videos without getting flamed from conservative atheists in the comments section who absolutely don't believe in God, but love them some Donald Trump. Not to mention, libertarianism, pretty much the polar opposite of communism, has an atheist streak a mile wide. I mean, Ayn Rand, pretty much the patron saint of libertarianism, was an atheist. But on to your larger point, and that is about the idea that Western society was built on Judeo-Christian values.
That the Western society that this rationalism exists in, those moral concepts being embedded in the society evolved through Judeo-Christian society in the West.
I would absolutely, wholeheartedly reject that idea. I would say that modern Western society exists as it does today in spite of Judeo-Christian values, not because of them. And that at one time, Western society did exist within a Christian framework, and that we have, over time, thankfully, excised many of those values. You know, values like slavery, as attested to time and again both in the Old Testament and New. And a practice that the Confederacy, a wholly Christian movement, sought to retain and often cited their Christian values as why they were so adamantly defending it. Or the genocide against the indigenous population of the burgeoning United States. The prevailing belief among many white Americans was that their culture and way of life, including Christianity, were superior. Removal was sometimes framed as a way of eventually Christianizing and civilizing Native Americans, albeit in a new territory away from white settlers. And westward expansion and the displacement of Native Americans was justified as part of God's plan or the natural course of progress where Christian civilization was destined to prevail. There's also the subjugation and chattel slavery of women, the classification of virtually anyone on the LGBTQ+ spectrum as living in abominable sin, which isn't to be tolerated in either law or culture. Or just the general idea that the church should not just be involved in matters of state, but should be the driving force in law and government. All of these things were aspects of Judeo-Christian ideology that were excised from Western society, much to the dismay of the Christians of the time, and in many cases, the Christians of today. Sociocultural progress has always come to the chagrin of the church, and Western culture has had to drag the church, kicking and screaming, into modern conceptions of things like I just listed. I mean, for fuck's sake, the Catholic Church didn't officially recognize the earth revolving around the sun and formally acknowledge their wrongness in condemning Galileo's work until 1992. As far as the notion that the laudable values of modern Western society, things like don't kill, don't steal or lie, caring